Hey folks, and welcome to the Daily Ratings Podcast. It's a show where each week we're going to be sitting down with Vincent Daly to get his thoughts on the latest movies he's been watching, both older films and new releases. And don't worry, there's no spoilers. Vince will give a brief review of the movie, share some thoughts, and of course, then rate the film. The daily ratings are always fair, honest, and most importantly, they're consistent. On today's show, Vince will be rating and reviewing. We have Gandahar, directed by René Laloux. We have Mars Express by Jérôme Perrin. We have Mononoke the Movie, Phantom in the Rain by Kenji Nakamura. And finally, newly released now in theaters, The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, directed by Kenji Kamiyama. So we have an adult animated week here, folks. I don't know what to expect. Let's hear what Vincent Daly has to say about it. Stay tuned and enjoy the show. Daly over there, how we doing?
Thomas, coffee bringing me back to life.
I'll tell you what, this is an adult animated day.
Right.
No kiddie films in this
no
one.
Kiddies.
That'll be next week.
Right.
Next week.
Next week is Sonic. Next week is Mufasa. This I wanted animated. I wanted for, the kids are in bed. This is your midnight special.
Kids are in bed all right. We have some adult themes.
Oh man, but yeah, no, I mean, this was it basically in essence what I was trying to do when we did the Inside Out special or episode, where I have a huge list of animated movies, anime, and otherwise, and I really want to chip away at them because I love coming across these movies.
Get them out of here. Get them out of here.
Get them out of here.
Get them done with.
Get them out of there.
So the method to this week was we have this Gandahar movie, Gandahar movie from 1987. René Laloux, the director, is a crazy animated director who we covered twice before?
Just once.
Okay.
Actually, on the Inside Out episode for Fantastic Planet.
Okay, so that's right. Pretty recent episode.
Yeah, I mean, back in April, but,
okay, all right.
Time definitely flies by.
Mars Express came out in 2023.
Yes.
And that's not difficult to get?
No. It was difficult I wanted to cover it in 2023 last year for the pod.
Okay.
But couldn't find it anywhere. I think it just got released wide streaming in May of this year.
Okay. Where did you find it? Where were you watching?
I just on Amazon Prime.
Ah, right. Okay.
Yep.
And then we had Mononoke the Movie, Phantom in the Rain.
Yep.
That's based off a show. You said that last week, but based on...
a 2007 show, a mini-series, 12 episodes.
Nothing to do with Princess Mononoke.
No, nothing to do with that. Actually, that show itself just uses Mononoke as a term to refer to spirits. It's kind of like ghost stories.
How about that? Okay, learning something here. And then, of course, we have the new Lord of the Rings movie. And this is the most American movie, probably, The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim.
Oddly enough, still done by an anime director.
What do you think of these namings of this movie?
Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim?
Yeah, I started having this issue with The Hobbit. The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies.
Oh, sure.
That's a horrible name.
It's exactly what we said with the Planet of the Apes movies as well. It's a little bit too...
It's too much.
Yeah, too much in the mouth.
The Lord of the Rings, which is fine because that's what the books are.
Right.
The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, even just The Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim would have been fine. It's just weird to have three thes. It's a lot going on in the title. Not a fan.
Yeah, I feel you. I mean, my cynical brain says that that's just more real estate for, future spin-off type of movies like this, where it's tackling one smaller story within the larger
that's
books.
fine.
Yeah.
But just make them easier, bite-size. This isn't a sexy title in the slightest.
You're right.
It's
not a sexy box office either.
These are the clunkiest things ever. It's not a sexy box office, no.
Did it do better than Craven, though?
I don't think so, no.
Oh, really? Oh, damn. That makes me sad then.
No, it did. No, definitely not. It came in. Craven was third best for the weekend. Lord of the Rings was fifth. There's Moana 2, Wicked, Craven, Gladiator 2, and War of the Rohirrim.
Okay. Well, it's a fight.
It is a major Lord of the major Lord of the Rings movie, maybe. but no one was talking about it ever. It got a big announcement when it was first announced back in 2021 or something like that.
Yeah.
So, and it's no shocking that it was Japanese animated Lord of the Rings film didn't do well. I mean,
even to the point that when you first brought it up on the podcast, even to the point of walking in the theater with you on Friday,
you had no idea.
It was just like, it was just such a why was this thing made? I was pleasantly surprised with it. But it was something there was just like, man, I mean...
Well, there's one main reason why it was made.
Yeah.
We'll get into that.
Yeah.
They had to make something, basically.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, one of those joints.
Well, so the deal is to keep, for New Line and Warner Bros. To keep the rights of the content, the deal was, way back when, that they had to release a certain amount of material. They were then getting threats that it was going to get pulled, the licenses agreement, especially after Amazon show. So that's when they were like, oh, we're doing a movie. We're doing this movie.
Oh, interesting.
And I think they had to do animated, and I have this kind of in my notes. I think they had to do animated because otherwise to do it, you would need to bring back all the sets. It would have to be all legit and be super expensive.
Yep.
Animated, you don't have to do that.
Wow.
So you can keep the set. Then Peter Jackson jumped on. He was all pissed he wasn't part of the Amazon Prime show. So he was happy to jump to this project. I'm glad he was then too. So, but that's why the movie was made, because it had to. Which, by the way, I'm fine with.
And in essence...
Feel the heat. I'm fine.
And in essence, is exactly the same situation Sony finds themselves in with the Marvel license for Spider-Man, why they had to make Kraven. So maybe the two obligations. They needed to check a box. But yeah, I was really happy with this week.
Quick movies. These first 3 movies pretty fast.
I knocked out 3 in a day. There's just so much there, though, that I really do love finding weird animated projects like this.
Yeah.
That, like a great example is Mars Express. Something that I knew a lot of people were hyping up for some time. It was in the corner of my eye as something that might be like potential for a nice sci-fi deep cut. I loved it. I mean, I really, really loved it.
Okay.
And a total surprise. So I'm excited to talk about all of these films.
If I had to watch one this week, it was going to be that.
Yes, it has to be Mars Express.
And then I looked at we'll get into it. Then I looked at the animation style, and I was just like, I don't know.
I'm with you. That's
exactly
why I stood away from it, because I was just like, this looks a little too simple.
Looks a bit too like Tron show.
Yeah,
I don't know
sure.
If you ever saw that Tron show?
I think so.
Okay, but anyway. Any other opening notes, Vin?
No, that's it. We can get into it.
All right, jumping back to 1987 again for the director Rene Laloux, and this is Gandahar. Is that pronounced right?
Yeah, Gandahar.
Yeah. Okay, get into it. These are all adult, I think, so...
Yeah, well, like Fantastic Planet, there's just, like, unexplained nudity in this one
okay,
as well.
All right, there you go. Okay.
There's that. So our first 2 films this week are both French animations, which I love to even just have the chance to cover in the first place, with the latter 2 being both Japanese anime. But, folks, that's where the similarities stop here, because these are 4 extremely different films.
Yeah.
Most of all, the one we are kicking off with here. The reason I wanted to cover this is a follow-up, like I said, to our animation episode earlier this year for when we covered some random animated projects for Inside Out, and where I covered the freaky and surreal Fantastic Planet from 1973. That was our director, Rene Laloux's first film out of 3 total features he directs, the next being Time Masters from 1982, where he collabs with the artist Mobius. Something I wanted to get to this week, honestly would have rounded out the 5th slot, but I just didn't really have time. And lastly, what we are talking about today, Gandahar from 1987, which is largely considered his masterpiece and showing the peak of his team's animating skills and why it kind of, even though Time Masters, Mobius is a really cool artist, would love to cover it. We will get to it eventually. This, I thought, would just be at a little bit of a higher caliber, and I'm happy to say that it was. Gandahar, once again, is a sci-fi that mixes magical and fantasy elements in order to create one of the most unique visions for a world, animated or otherwise. The story is around the kingdom of Gandahar, which is a future utopia that has turned away from science in exchange for a perfect coexistence with nature and stands as the pinnacle of society. When an unprompted attack leaves one of his towns in ruin, the ruling council recruits one of their elite soldiers elite soldiers, Sylvain, to embark on a journey and find the source of this opposition. Sylvain goes on this journey and discovers much more than his masters would like, however, especially around the dark past of the kind of arrogant scientific experiments that the kingdom once conducted. And that lack of scientific responsibility will come to haunt them, however, as an army of autonomous robots are being led by an unknown creature of immense psychic power with control over reality itself as we know it. Right off the bat, the animation here is a massive, leaps and bounds a step up from Fantastic Planet, which was easily the biggest black eye on that film, especially when it came to how little motion there was in the animation itself. I didn't go back and listen to my review on Fantastic Planet, but in remembering that film, a lot of sequences where dialogue was being the focus, not necessarily the sights and sounds of the Fantastic Planet. There was just like a real bad habit for one mouth on one person to be moving at a time, and then the entire frame is still no motion, no one's doing.
Slow.
I need someone juggling in the corner or something.
Yeah.
And that does a lot. That does a lot to take you out of the film.
Oh my gosh!
There's not something you're connecting with there.
I'd be falling asleep.
Yeah, right.
Real quick, what's the year difference between Fantastic Planet and Gandahar?
73 versus 87.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay,
we're over 10 years.
That's a big jump, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And admittedly, I don't know, I didn't research that much into what's happening in these years between for Lulu's projects. But he does 3 and he's out. I love that because guess what? We can get all of his movies on the site pretty easily. So, while all of his films have a wonderful, wonderful sci-fi design that will blow your mind, animation is still a medium that aims at adapting real life. The challenge his films have are not in concepts, not in the design, but rather in the mundane moments of conversation or character interaction. Luckily, that isn't a problem at all here, and even if there are still a few reused animations here and there, like walking of a lot of characters, it seems like his team was able to match their skill set to the imagination on display in that 10 plus years in between these two films that we've talked about so far. I think I was just most impressed, though, with this film for how far the story goes. Not being your average hero's journey at all. This really goes places, and I wasn't expecting it. I obviously won't go into spoilers, but it plays into a big part of why I thought this was worth checking out in the first place, because not only was it out there in design and visuals, but I don't know. I mean, I'll compare it to some things, but it really is hard to compare to anything. It's a wild sci-fi story that goes a lot of places and was exciting for that reason.
For an hour and 18 minutes, is it like you getting slapped across the face just left and right?
No.
With crazy shit happening?
If anything, it's just it's a natural kind of build up to one point, and then it's just like, whoa, classic. The closest thing I can relate it to was when we covered Trap, where it was just like in the story, I was like, where is this going now? It's at that point that I'm just saying, like, wow, I have no idea where this is gonna go. This opens with an Isaac Asimov quote, which probably would have been better suited for our next film. But I just love this theme of science pushed too far being woven into every ounce of this story. The whole movie gave me a lot of older sci-fi vibes, maybe close to something like a John Carter of Mars. You remember John Carter? They did that bad Disney film?
Yeah.
But that's an old like sci-fi serial. It's for that mix of like fantasy tribal elements and then sci-fi tech. But I think why this worked for me so much is, again, because of that mix of fantasy being a result of actually a far future world, maybe even an apocalyptic world. It's exactly what I adore about one of my top 3 Studio Ghibli films, 1984's Nausicaa Valley of the Wind. This hit in that same sphere, and that's why I was digging it so much. On kind of the note of, kind of far future sci-fi worlds, the music is extremely prog rock and matches the design of the film, feeling like a Yes album cover come to life or something like that. I mean, I talked about Kansas with these dark fantasy ones. This is like ELP with Tarkus and Yes album covers.
It's up your alley, then.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. But you know,
Interesting array of movies the composer has.
Yeah. What was it?
Talented Mr. Ripley, The English Patient,
Yeah.
Cold Mountain.
I know. I looked it up. I was just like, I don't know if if this is exactly worth bringing up.
There's
But
134 credits to his name.
Wow.
As far as just composing.
yeah.
Or composer, yeah.
Honestly, all of it is just, man, it's just so condensed in its style. It's so pure in its style of fantasy and sci-fi that I don't know. I did listen back to my Fantastic Planet review. I think I probably said the same thing. That's like a prog album cover. My elevator pitch for this is that it feels like a dozen paperback sci-fi novels condensed into one, and is pretty great for that reason, and pretty not really touched on. It's like we've been talking about with some of the fantasy movies that we've been covering, that it's so pure in its fantasy. Maybe that comes off as boring to some, but as a lover of the genre directly, of fantasy and sci-fi, this, I'm after these type of things. I'm after, the genuine article here. I don't know when I'll be able to cover René Laloux's last remaining film, but I feel this has to be one of the most enjoyable directors to check out on the podcast, even if his study, so to speak, is broken up across a few episodes. Without a great modern copy of the film, Gandahar is bound to bounce around to many different streaming services, actually being free on Amazon Prime right now, believe it or not.
Yes, it is, yep.
But wherever you happen to track it down, you have a surreal and psychedelic adventure to check out. We're going to go ahead and give Gandahar 1987 a 71.
Wow, 71%. That's a pretty good for a very old and basically indie animated project.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you gave Fantastic Planet, I believe, it was 64.
Yeah, and that, I mean, again, a love for the design, a love for everything in that film besides the animation itself.
Right, right. A little bit too basic. Well, we're taking a big old jump now into, like you said, last year this came out. And this is called Mars Express by Jérôme Perrin, another French guy. And like I said, this sparked my interest the most. And the only thing keeping me back was the animation style.
Yeah.
It felt too kid animated show. But I'm excited to hear about it. So Mars Express, what's it about?
Yeah, well, this movie has been on my catch-up list for a while now, mostly because I just couldn't find it anywhere. But, I mean, on your note, Tom, this is by no means a kid's movie. I think when these adult animated projects come around, they just get brushed aside because it's probably like, who wants to pick this up? What actual distribution
Well, it's
is
such
this
a
gonna
small
go
movie,
to?
too. So this isn't even rated officially,
really?
meaning it didn't even go through the process.
Oh, wow.
So very small release.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. It comes from a French animator that most Western audiences wouldn't have experience with. Jérôme Perrin cut his teeth on a 2016 French show called Last Man, and from what I hear, it's a pretty wild show. I don't know what you're thinking of.
I thought...
His ears perked up.
Okay, French show you said?
Yeah,
Okay.
French animated show. And basically kind of, it seems where I say kind of cut his teeth, it seems where this particular type of 3D animation came from that he uses in this film that we'll talk about in just a second. But this is now his first feature film, and in addition to receiving praise at Cannes, Mars Express has been constantly in the corner of my eye, being recommended as one of the best sci-fi deep cuts to come out in a long time, and I am very happy to say that we have a successful gem in the rough.
Cool.
This was awesome. I was really in love with this movie.
Really? I mean, it's highly praised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I'm on your page 100%, Tom. Like, I pushed this to the side because, one, I couldn't find it, but two, there was something there I was just kind of like, I don't know, it looks kind of all right. I don't know why this is getting so much praise. Man, I wish I watched this much sooner.
Cool.
Mars Express is probably best described as a cyberpunk detective thriller that dives deep into heady concepts around artificial intelligence and robotics through a top-notch world building that goes on here. If there's single praise for this, it is the world building. Really, really amazing. amazing. The setup is in a neo-noir future of the 23rd century. Ruby is a private detective on a fully colonized and thriving Mars, thriving so much that it's better than Earth. She works with her former squad mate Carlos, who is now fully implanted into an android body after losing everything but his memory backup. They receive a string of jobs from their friend Roy Jacker, now a tech mogul, asking them to hunt down hackers that threaten the launch of an entirely organic computer line set to revolutionize the industry. This takes Ruby down a rabbit hole of conspiracy, driven by the innovation that surrounds her as she discovers human nature rarely ever changes. This sci-fi world building, though, I mean, man, this reminds me, obviously, of Blade Runner. I would describe it, and where it was such a hit for me, I would probably describe it a little bit closer to the cyberpunk masterpiece Ghost in the Shell. Actually, both of these being unusual tie-ins to our new release, which is, believe it or not, actually a thing. The guy that does the War of the Rohirrim not only worked on an anime Blade Runner, but did all the original Ghost in the Shell TV show.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That makes sense for this, just it being futuristic Mars.
Oh, yeah.
Future techie.
But also 23rd century. Like, it's...
Oh, is that Ghost in the Shell?
No, but more so just like, I don't know. This is such a jump in tech. And just such a jump.
Right.
Like, they had to do some serious world building here to grab my attention and grab the audience's attention.
Where it makes it feel like it's not 2070.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's not your average, like, we still got like Taco Bell or something like that. You know what I mean? There is such a jump in technology that fundamental things have like really changed.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And again, it's an hour and a half. It was an hour and 28 minutes. So it's like they're getting a lot done.
Yeah. Absolutely. The similarities to Ghost in the Shell here are countless, but I primarily put them together in how we discover this future world through detective and crime work. Androids and cybernetics shape how this story is told, but seeing how Mars Express outlines the future with both advanced and familiar concepts is what really makes it excellent. A great example of this is concepts like this full android backup if you die, perfectly copying your consciousness, not an ounce of skin. How do we explore that? Well, that's explored in the story alongside of grief counseling, how relationships would be affected by losing your body, even though the person essentially is the same. It's some serious sci-fi gold here. Someone that loves world building in any storytelling, I'm telling you, this knocked it out of the park, making these wild concepts digestible and maybe most importantly impactful to actually mean something for the viewer. You know, you can have something really out there as far as sci-fi goes. Maybe even some of the stuff that we'll see Dune get into in these future sequels. But if it doesn't connect with us somehow, if it doesn't make it impactful, then it's going to bounce off the viewer, and I feel like that is what this was able to achieve through its world building. It was really like, wow, excellent. Let's talk about that animation style, though. And I have to admit, it's not the prettiest looking project. And again, like I said, why I might have stayed away from checking it out a little bit sooner. The whole look of this is done in 3D animation. There is a type of shaded 3D animation that gives characters an overly smooth look to them. And I would say can kind of leave a lot to be desired, especially in this week with just some stunning competition. As you watch the film, though, you slowly start to appreciate how the simple character faces are drawn because of the emotional moments when they come along, how they are animated. At first, it feels like someone will just kind of look weird or highlight a feature not normally drawn on their face. A good example is that, like, our two main characters, Ruby and Carlos, they'll like look at each other and the face goes from very plain to almost over animated. I was watching this, I was just like, oh, why didn't they just animate it at that quality the whole time? But it really does feel intentional because there's a degree here that when like serious emotional beats come in this film, the contrast of going from very plain faces that we're looking at for the whole time, maybe even realistic faces, to these hyper animated moments of like terror or anything like that, you get something more out of it. It really does pay off in an interesting way when you get a real reaction out of a character that now suddenly this absent face has details to communicate the scene to us. It's something different for sure. It might not be everyone's bag. Like I said, I was certainly hesitant, but looking at his previous work, it seems to be the director's style. If you look at Last Man, it has that same kind of vibe that he's doing this cel-shaded 3D, very simple figures, probably the economical choice as well for a TV show production. But somewhere in between, it seems like this has been his style to under-animate, to only over-animate when these big moments come in the story. But honestly, folks, this was fantastic. A total sci-fi deep cut to discover, even though it has been a long time since I was even trying to find one. I've been on this dark fantasy kick. I've kicked Buzz Lightyear to the side, and now I don't know. I don't know what the dark fantasy is in the Toy Story analogy. But I've already compared this to a few great doubleheader contenders, but it really belongs side by side with something like I, Robot.
That makes sense. Yeah,
they're both similar Asimov stories, but Mars Express has infinitely more to say. Give it a watch. This gets a full recommendation from me. We're going to go ahead and give Mars Express 2023 an 81.
Whoa! 81%?
This was fantastic.
Wow.
And we said, these are all adult animations. If you did, and you said it was kind of like, it looked a little kiddie or something like that. If you pop this on, the first scene is one of the most violent neck breaks I've seen in a while animated. This is Ghost in the Shell in a good way because it's about crime. This is neo-noir for sure.
I like that pulling me. That can pull me in.
Yeah.
Wow, I might give this a watch. And at 81%, that's really not easy to do for an animated film for you.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I love it, Vin. I love that you love this film.
Yeah, really, really fantastic. Can't wait to see whatever he cooks up next. I mean, probably will be a significant time jump. We look at Last Man wrapped in 2016. This is now 2023. God knows how it's going to be released, or distributed.
Well, it's already kind of had its lifespan. And this is just one for this is how these movies are. You guys are in the world, you animation guys. Have your your pulse on something, because this is just no one's ever heard of this probably. More than likely, unless you're in it.
Right.
You haven't really heard about this.
Yeah.
And this might even have a place for me.
I think so. I think this was besides its animated qualities, this was just an excellent sci-fi story.
Okay.
I take this honestly in any medium. If it was live action, if it was a book, I thought this is a case where the story propelled it so much higher.
Okay.
So.
And the guy in it, by the way, Chris Royjacker, plays the bad guy in Quantum of Solace.
yeah.
For a little connective tissue there. Something.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
This is Mononoke movie. Has this been around on Netflix for a while? Is this new release?
This Mononoke movie, I'll give a little bit of an explanation of where it connects to the show. But this was supposed to be a new release come this last July. I had it on my list, but obviously was nowhere to be seen. Netflix seemed to have picked this up, and I don't know when it hit Netflix, but certainly a new slot for this.
Okay, so this is going under Now Playing on the website. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, all right. So before that, let's go into our producer segment.
Okay, there we go.
That's what I was driving at.
Okay.
But no, we do have a producer for this week, and it's a face that we haven't seen in a while. So we have Brandon Beebe writing in.
Oh, wow. Just in time for Sonic 3.
Okay. So Brandon donated in $24.70.
Oh, very specific.
Very specific. And he goes, "Yes, I am back." He goes, "Took a while to dig myself out of the grave after watching season 2 of Halo." He goes, "I want you both to go to the movie of the year." So I think that's hence the $24.70.
Yeah.
Giving us 2 movie tickets. I want you both to go to the movie of the year, Sonic 3. I can't wait for the review from Vinny saying nothing will beat this movie. and 2 polished shoes from Tom.
That's great.
So, okay. So first of all, Brandon, welcome. Yeah, it's you produce so much, and we haven't heard from you for a while. So it's great to have you back. $24.70, 2 movie tickets, Vin. One for me and one for me this week.
That might go towards Mufasa.
Okay, and Sonic 3. Yeah, we're covering it.
Oh yeah. I mean, listen, as someone that had Sonic and Shadow the Hedgehog on their birthday cake. I think it was my 3rd birthday. Oh, no, not my 3rd birthday. My 3rd grade birthday. I will say I am slightly excited for Sonic 3.
Whoa! Hello!
Woo! It looks to
See what happens when you line the pockets, Brandon?
Right.
Stick a movie ticket in there. All of a sudden you get some flowery language there. Wow. Okay.
My.
What are you excited about?
And I'll say good about this for the review, but and I haven't seen it yet, of course. But there's something to it that it reminds me of. They're going towards kind of the craziness of the GameCube Sonic games. That's where the Shadow the Hedgehog comes from, and. These are just, I don't know, it has the baggage out of the way. Like, if I think back to the first and second one, the second one was just getting into this realm of just like, oh, wow, this doesn't feel like Sonic and Buddy Cop. This feels like a Sonic movie.
Yeah, was it the first one that was heavy on the Buddy Cop?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
and then the second one...
It just feels like they just didn't have the confidence to pull it off. They needed some real-world tie, no less Olive Garden product placement.
Yes, that was a big bugaboo with you.
Yeah.
And Jim Carrey is back?
He's playing 2 roles, actually, in this. It's wonderful. But yeah, that's overall why I have some, I don't know, anticipation, some hype towards Sonic 3, because it feels like it's finally it's in its own realm. It's not trying to be any.
Well, no, I'm saying we're at movie number 3. We're ready to rock and roll now.
Yes, absolutely. Nothing holding it back. It can just be its own thing, and the Sonic fans are going to like it, and probably normal fans are going to like it too.
Did we cover 2 when it was new?
Yeah. That was
they pumped these out like clockwork, I think.
Yeah, well, 1 we covered just in anticipation of 2.
We've been doing the podcast for a little bit now. I love that we're getting second directors already, or second movies from directors and such.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, Brandon. Thank you so much, man, for donating 2 movie tickets at $24.70, approaching director level. I think Brandon's I think the closest to becoming a director.
Interesting.
Which we're yet to have a director on the show.
Well, don't make me watch the Halo show because I really don't want to.
That's okay. Shows are excluded. That's okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, so folks, if you're wondering what's going on, or of course if you're a frequent listener, you know that this is the producer segment where we take time to thank our producers, read their notes if they write in. And you become a producer by donating into the show, just like Brandon did this week. So you go to thedailyratings.com and head to the donations tab, and through your monetary support, you are a legitimate producer of the Daily Ratings. We have some set donations there, or you can send in whatever amount that you want. You'll see on the website a big value for value yellow button there. What that is, it's any amount of value that you're getting from our content. So listening to the podcast, stopping in at the website and kind of seeing what to watch, what's worth a watch. If you're enjoying what we're putting out of the Daily Ratings, we look at that as value in your pocket. Can you send us value in your pocket? And that's value for value. That's the model that we're going off of. So we're not going to make the Daily Ratings advertising model based, where we're going to shove ads down your throat or on the website. We're also not subscription based, where you're tied into a monthly thing. And it's not a payment tier structure like Patreon, where the more money you give us, the more content you get. Everything we do is out there. Everyone's got their own finances. So whatever you can donate in, big or small, we appreciate it so much. And when you donate, when you become a producer, you can send in a note along with it, just like Brandon did this week. It could be questions, comments, critiques. It could be ask us anything about movies, not about movies, about TV, whatever it is. If you're producing the show, that means something special. You can send your donation notes to tom.vin@thedailyratings.com. You can email us there. And like I said, anything you want, and we'll read it here on the producer segment. Again, it's thedailyratings.com. Head to the donations tab if you want to be a producer for next week's episode 166. Okay, Vince, so with that, let's go to Netflix's Mononoke the Movie, Phantom in the Rain, directed by Kenji Nakamura. this director was not on the site, and the writer was not on the site.
Yeah.
And so they're not connected. Are they connected to the show?
I actually don't know. I think just because I didn't actually bother looking into that because there's just such a big gap in years from the original show.
Okay.
So.
He is a big TV guy. I'm not sure if I'm seeing the original, actually, of Mononoke.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But regardless, these two guys aren't on the site, so let's see how they did. This is Mononoke the Movie.
Yeah. Well, among the many anime deep cuts that I have floating around in my brain, and hopefully we'll get a chance to cover in some capacity on the show, in no way, folks, did I expect a movie to be made off of a great 12-episode miniseries from 2007. The show Mononoke, not to be confused with Princess Mononoke, fits into the brief genre trend of the late 2000s where animes were focusing on kind of these small episodic ghost stories told through the eyes of a wandering stranger. Great examples of this and full recommendations to watch are shows like Mushishi or Kino's Journey, both getting a second chance in the 2010s to continue their legacy. But it was always heartbreaking to see the original Mononoke not get that same chance to stick around in some capacity, whether it be a season 2, kind of a rework of the show, a remaster, or a movie like this. Especially since, even back then, the art was just so breathtaking. Mononoke's easily the hook for why you want to check out this show is because this show is dripping gorgeous, and constantly so. Well, the day has come. Not only is the movie a solid return to this kaleidoscope world of the series, it's actually kicking off multiple movies that we'll see over the next few years. Because this is, I believe, either one of a two-part or even one of something further in kind of doing a movie series rather than a TV series or multiple episodes. You're not digging that?
I'm not digging that, no.
Oh, yeah?
Well, I just feel like I don't know. Is it going to be like Marvel where there's a bunch of homework you have to do? How much are these different, just almost standalone stories? You know what I mean?
Yep.
My question that I was going to ask for this is this going to be a good gateway anime or animated films for somebody?
Sure. That's a tough one because I think this being on Netflix and Netflix picking it up for distribution, that's great. I mean, this is like a really gorgeous anime.
Yeah.
It is very much a sequel to the series. Now, the good news is the 12-episode miniseries, Netflix has that as well.
Yeah.
So if you want to do some,
It's not a good gateway product.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely continuing in the line of it. But what I would say there is that Mononoke itself is definitely worth checking out.
Gotcha.
Mononoke is a spooky detective mystery where the story always puzzles together a new spirit haunting at the hands of the aloof medicine man. For this movie, it's able to work exactly like the series, following the medicine man on another spirit exorcism, discovering the people involved might not be too far from the monsters as well. Our story this time deals with the inner chamber of a secretive oku, a mansion of over 2,000 housemaids in training with shady ties to the emperor's personal concubines. We see this through the eyes of two initiates, learning the ways of this mystic house, only to discover the horrifying and painful truth of the cult-like operation. Though closed to outside eyes, the Oku is under the pensive observation of the medicine man as madness spirals out of control. Like all spirits he hunts, he must find the Mononoke's form, truth, and reason to proceed with the exorcism before it's too late. Folks, my recommendation, both for the movie and the show, just, again, boils down to the huge style of Mononoke being just the biggest hook to watch. And the animation matches the original series being just I've said it now multiple times, a kaleidoscope. There's no other way to describe it, of color that intentionally calls back to a period of feudal Japan where artistic expression was paramount. This look is achieved by animating the outline of characters and scenes, not coloring them in, which are then layered over real textures and real patterns and real fabrics, coloring in the frame for them. This allows for just the most colorful of decorative patterns to be used, which would otherwise be impossible to animate. And while Mononoke isn't the first to do this method, it certainly is a feast for the eyes. I cannot tell you how much. I mean, I even watched like 2 episodes of the original series from 2007, and man, I mean, this is just such a gorgeous, gorgeous show.
Yeah, the stills and the imaging looks pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And I also kind of like the animation style here. I don't know what the name is. It's not hand-drawn all the way through. But it looks almost like drawn and colored in. It looks like crayons that are used almost.
Absolutely. And I think part of that is coming from just like, again, they're placing these real patterns or real textures over the animation frame, you know?
Any type of specific animation name that is? Or
I mean, essentially that would be cell animation, that you have the foreframe of it being characters, so you don't have to draw the entire background. If anything, that's just a shorthand further that the background is just a real texture. They're not drawing the background at all.
Yes. Yeah.
Know?
Okay. I'm very serious. I want to do a special where we talk about if we would talk about animation and animation styles.
Sure.
We don't have to talk about movies. I mean, we'll bring them up as examples.
Yeah.
But just because you are the repper of trying to get anime
I'll rep it.
in the States.
Yeah.
And it's slowly happening.
Yeah.
Not that you're doing anything about it, but I mean, you're enjoying it. You're enjoying almost dream coming true in a way. I mean, our next film, that I want to propose, the next film is going to be our, a huge gateway because it's so Americanized. But it's also very true to kind of initial anime or Japanese anime style.
Absolutely.
But my thing is, you can get so lost in the sauce, and I get confused.
Sure,
and I'm a co-host of the show of all the different animation styles where it needs such an explanation. It's so important with how these movies look because it's a totally different vibe.
Yeah,
like and you have these. It is such a scale of how an anime. You just call something anime and how it can look when you're watching it.
Sure.
And it would be good if we had something like that where we can, hey, go back to that episode. Go back to the episode. So all you have to say is one thing, one type of anime style, and we all kind of know what you're talking about.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And, I mean, the real moment that I will say I've won the battle is when Netflix stops putting everything anime in one category, like it's one genre. It's the sword I'm going to fall on is that it's a medium. Animation is a medium of storytelling, like a book or live action film. It's not... anime can span every genre. This being a spooky Knives Out detective story, is exactly very different than what we talked about with the cyberpunk stuff. Not just a moment ago. There's something there that I definitely agree. There's a lot that I personally would like to even research even in further, and what are like the big hallmarks of
that we
jumps
could flesh
in
out.
animation.
Like Anime 101, I think would be an excellent special for us to do.
Sure.
1 for our listeners, 2 for me.
Yeah.
And maybe even for you when you have to actually look, okay, what is my rubric? If you're a professor, what is my rubric? And I can boil this down.
Sure.
Any dummy on the other side of the table can understand.
You're not a dummy. I will say, though, that my interest for something like that would definitely be, I don't know, maybe it would be too much of a special, but just like studying, like we did with stop motion animation, studying the advances over the decades, because, I mean, honestly, until the 2000s, it was all cell animated. It was all done with figures in the front, backgrounds in the back.
Yeah, right.
I mean, really, that's only changed with 3D being added to it.
Right.
So that's actually a great bridge into just my last note on this animation. For this movie specifically, that same animation technique is used with 3D as well. Mainly the 3D action sequences in this, not colored in, and instead of the coloring, again, they're using these wild decorative patterns, these very, not ancient, but feudal Japanese patterns as the color inspiration on frame. And even though it's been a while since I've seen the original show all the way through, I can tell you that the action and fluid movement is taken to just a whole new level in this. Story-wise is where I felt this needed to click a bit into place better. And maybe that ties into, kind of your gut reaction, Tom, that this is a broken up movie, into multiple parts. And these type of stories, it's about the place. I know it's about the characters that we were visiting, but I just needed a lot more Medicine Man because he is obviously just like the coolest character in this whole show. The way his spirit of investigation works is he needs 3 pieces of evidence to basically connected to the ghost, the form, the truth, the reason. And I think one of these episodic stories should ideally work like The Witcher or Knives Out or any of these whodunits do, where all of the info that we're gathering about the mystery, or in this case, the monster and spirit, is gathered by our main detective and not just some other character. Like the huge amount of whodunits that we see and how they operate, we've covered that plenty on the podcast now. And I think that is where, not necessarily is this a hook into anime, but I think this is a hook into anyone that likes further style of like mystery and detective shows. Mononoke is just that, but just taken to such an extreme of this like Japanese spiritualism as the subject matter of it. So, and very spooky. This is, again, this probably is the most kid friendly, being a Netflix release and whatnot, but it's
PG-13.
Yeah,
it's rated PG-13.
There's something here that's just like, oh yeah, I forgot that this was trying to be a little bit of a scary show.
Some darker theming, yeah.
Yeah.
Like a spooky, animated Columbo. That's what this is.
And yes, absolutely. Ghost Columbo.
I've just decided.
Mononoke, second movie, Ghost Columbo. Oh, man. But I would just say why this story needed to click better, and why I'm kind of focusing on like who our detective is and why that's important for one of these stories is that it splits its time just between a bit too many characters, and some of those characters are just annoying that they have so much focus put on them. I think especially for new viewers, I think keeping the spotlight on the evidence structure just would have made for a much tighter story. And that's really what drove me to just watch 2 episodes of that original series again, to just see like how much was actually done with the medicine man, and just, all of it is the medicine man. So, I think that's where this could have been tighter. Maybe all this character setup, that is also an ugly side of splitting up this movie into however many movies there are going to be. That might be, kind of an ugly side product or byproduct of that.
Or they're completely different.
Yeah.
Look at like what they're doing on Netflix with Glass Onion.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the new one's called.
Oh, yeah. Actually, who knows what
But you know what I mean? It's almost the same thing, because it's Knives Out, Glass Onion, Knives Out, and then the third one.
Yeah. But I mean, you hit it on the head, because it's
Ghost Detective.
Exactly. What's the tie there? It's the detective. It's why can't I think of his name?
I'm the Daniel Craig.
Daniel Craig. Yeah.
So
that is why it's working. And I would honestly, a side recommendation, that's how Witcher works as well. It's always about Geralt and finding the mystery of the monster, and maybe you discover the monster is the man. That is the arc for these type of episodic detective stories, and that's why Mononoke hits and is like just visually gorgeous. So I certainly thought this worked as a nice payoff for the series, but I got to be honest here. I think this might be a bit too crazy to hook the vast amount of new viewers watching this, whether you stumble upon it on Netflix, even with the original series being there, or just kind of like throw it on. It's just something like really colorful to watch. It just might not hook in the way that I think it should hook. At the same time, this works as just kind of one big episode. That might be the best case for new viewers. And guess what? That 12-episode original series isn't too far of a click away if you want to check it out. I think for my recommendation, how to gauge this for you, again, we've talked a lot about these kind of like detective story arcs, how a detective story works like that, a little bit separate than like our whodunit commentary like we've talked about in the past. But, if you like Knives Out and Glass Onion, all Netflix stuff, this is a good bridge over that. I would say if you like kind of these slight horror vibes of Japanese stuff, not like outwardly scary, but kind of spooky, like Spirited Away or some of the cult horror that we've covered recently on the podcast, this is, again, kind of fits in that sphere. I'm really resistant to say it, but put it on in the background of your Halloween party. I gotta really come up with, because that's insulting to the movies.
You want the chicks to leave.
Yeah.
Put on
this one gets them out.
No, but look at the animation. Look at it. It's called cell animation. It's called cell. This is what they do.
No, it's really good. They don't do it anymore. It's all 3D. if you want the trickster.
That would kind of be cool, though, background. That would be a great screensaver.
Oh, it's so colorful.
Because it just looks crazy.
It's so colorful. And
an icebreaker. What a good icebreaker to have on when the party starts. How about that?
Everyone's just hypnotized by it. Everyone's just quiet. But I mean, really, all of what we've been talking about so far, my best elevator pitch is literally every single frame of animation in this. Check out a screen grab. Browse past it on Netflix, and you will see just how dripping gorgeous the Mononoke property is. So check it out and see if it sparks your imagination. We're going to go ahead and give Mononoke Phantom in the Rain a 65.
Okay, 65%. Enough there visually, but substance-wise, it kind of was maybe... It's shocking to hear you say it might be a little bit too much.
Yeah, it's just that... So
it tries to do too much.
It really just boiled down. You got half of the movie is set up for the case, if you will, and then the other half of the movie... Medicine Man steps in and he does what he does on basically every episode. The problem with that is it's like once the Medicine Man steps in, it's just like a mile a minute. And I found myself, I was just like, oh, he has those kind of powers? Like, even as a former watcher of the show, I was like, wait, what's going on? So might be the anime-ness, the craziness that anime can have sometimes. I think that might be a little bit of a turn-off.
Yeah, it goes ham.
So
65%. That is a good movie, though, for us.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent, Vin. I had another comment to make, but maybe I can't. Oh, as far as a daily ratings top tip, how Netflix can be when you just for a fraction of a second, you land on a movie and then the trailer starts and it's loud and super annoying. Don't forget, you can go to your settings and turn that stuff off.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yes.
That's a practical tip.
It's a daily ratings top tip.
I'm good. New section on the show. Daily ratings top tip.
Okay, Vin. So with that, we have our last film. This is The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. And I think Vin and I talked about it before where... I think it's almost important to say, where does this movie exist in the world? What time period are we in? Why does it exist? What is it exactly?
Yeah.
So we talked about it in the beginning of the episode where the reason why the movie came out or why it was even made was because they needed to make something to keep the license of the content or the material.
Yeah.
So with that, they came up with this plan, I want to say 2021.
I read 2021 as well.
Yeah, because it was supposed to come out in April of this year, I think, and it got pushed back with all just the writers' crap. You know what I mean? So, and I think a December release is better because it's very Lord of the Ringsy. That's when everything, like the Hobbits and Lord of the Rings, came in December.
A commentary I actually heard with Craven is that apparently there is studios try to release on December just because you get a lot of reruns into January. So if something is a hit at all, it'll have a really long box office life into January.
Yeah,
you're not dumper.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to set up the story here.
Folks, Tom gave me just a wonderful debrief in the parking lot of the movie theater, us freezing our asses off. And it would just be so wrong if I just did not give him the reins to kick this off.
I just want to give a boilerplate, catch everybody up. So if you look at the title, The War of the Rohirrim, why should I care about this? What is this? What homework do I have to do?
Sure.
I'll set everybody up for it right now. Basically, War of the Rohirrim obviously takes place in Rohan, okay? For all of you who, like, the basic stuff with Lord of the Rings is the Rohan or the horse people. So in the second movie, the Two Towers...
You don't have to dumb it down that much.
Well, just in case, they're the ones on the horses. On the third one, they kind of come save the day on their horses in the big battle sequence, but that is Rohan. Rohan are the horse people.
Okay.
That's what they're about.
This is not showing your prowess for this universe.
Well, this is for the people. I'm setting up for the people. As far as when in the world are we? Frodo and Sam set out from the Shire in the Fellowship of the Ring of the Third Age, year 3018.
Okay, all right.
Okay?
Yep,
the War of the Rohirrim is taking place in the Third Age, 2750s.
Okay.
Like 2758, 2759 is where the movie takes place. So we're about 250 years before the events of The Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
We're 183 years before The Hobbit takes place.
Ah, okay.
That's where we are.
That's great markers.
Yes, that's where we are in the world. So, as far as the show is concerned, the What is the show called? The Rings of Power?
Rings of Power, yeah.
That place takes in the Second Age. That is literally like 4,000 years before all of this.
Gotcha.
Okay? So the good guys in the film are the Rohirrim, the people of Rohan, and they are led by their king, King Helm. King, again, another just place marker. King Helm is the 9th king of Rohan. Theoden, who we see in The Lord of the Rings, he's the 17th king.
Yeah, well, I
Rohan.
found this very useful just to kind of give you an idea of, not that it's going to be like, they're going to be barbarians or something like that. I mean, this is an much earlier view of Rohan.
Yeah, and not crazy earlier, but and Rohan is not an old... Rohan in total, during The Lord of the Rings, Rohan is only 500 years old. So this is actually a good middle segment of where Rohan is at, basically halfway through. So, good guy, we have King Helm with the Rohirrims, and then the bad guys are called the Dunlendings. The Dunlendings, okay? The Dunlendings were hostile towards the Men of the West, like Gondor and the Rohirrims, especially Rohan, because their territories butt up against each other, and they're super close. The reason why Rohan exists is because Gondor gifted a plot of land to the Rohirrims, because the Rohirrims came to save the day for them 500 years ago, whatever. So basically, and the problem is that took people's territory of the different races of men, and that's why the Dunlendings have a big gripe and are always squabbling with the Rohirrims. It's always land battles, always territories.
Sure.
And because you're super close, a lot of those races, sometimes you have intermixing races of the men. You have some Rohan people mixing and blending in with the Dunlendings. Even,
okay.
Just because of proximity. So one of the local Rohan lords, whose name is Freka, a basic Rohan lord where he has his own stronghold, gathers his own riches. He claims to be a descendant of one of the kings of Rohan, but he's also said to have a lot of Dunlending blood. He is one of these mixed race guys, kind of. And he also looks different than normal Rohirrim, got people, whatever.
Sure.
So he's a punk. He does his own thing. He doesn't he doesn't show up to the council meetings when King Helm calls for them. He does his own thing.
Got you.
Until one day, Freka calls a meeting with King Helm. Freka asks the king to have Helm's daughter marry Freka's son, Wolf.
Okay.
And
this is what we see in the opening act.
Yes, this gets us to the very start of the movie. King Helm doesn't necessarily trust Freka because we think that he's just out for the throne himself. He also has this Dunlending blood in him, so Helm is not about the marriage, and that's where the movie picks up.
Yes. One question I had when you first explained this to me is, where is this listed in the?
We're in the appendices
of the original trilogy.
The appendices are at the end of the Return of the King.
Oh wow! Okay.
So. And we're in Appendices A.
Everyone get your books out.
Yeah.
And
Appendices A is of the book. This is where it's coming from.
Interesting. I though this is a side story, I just find such appreciation for Tolkien's work, again, as a world builder, that he has this much detail of a story within a story within a story, that is found in the backs of this book,
I did a lot with this one. I mean...
Yeah. Respect beyond respect.
It is the biggest or the most fleshed out fantasy world that we have.
Yeah, absolutely.
I knew about King Helm. I heard about this story before, and I kind of know King Helm a little bit. I still went back and did YouTube catch-ups. I went back and I listened to the Appendices audiobook.
Okay.
Andy Serkis.
Oh, nice.
Another Daily Ratings top tip, can I just say?
Sure.
You know how...
Give the tip. Listen.
You know how I'm the only person who uses Amazon Music in the country?
Right. Soon to be gone, right?
Well, I'll tell you what, I can't stand it. The UI is terrible. It's always messing up. I'm always liking songs. They don't end up in my like section. But I have it because I save a couple bucks because when you're a Prime member, you have Amazon Music, whatever.
Right.
However, just started last month. You now get one free audiobook a month.
Wow.
If you have Amazon Music Unlimited.
There it is.
Return of the King, got it.
There it is.
Is that a good catch-up, though? Are you...
I think that's great.
Okay.
And
we know
again,
where we're at.
I think it was fascinating to me just for the time, the goal markers of where we are from the story and, why that's still, even though several generations later, why this could still matter, for it.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so... How do you want to start? I'll toss it to you, and we'll take this back and forth.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I would say while I might be on a fantasy kick this year, my skin in the game wasn't really it being Lord of the Rings, more so that it's a anime. So,
right.
like we joked about, I mean, this is the perfect meeting of both of our interests. It
really is.
This is the crossroads with it. Kenji Kamiyama is connected to some gold in that anime space.
The director, by the way. Yeah.
Yes, primarily for the 1999 film Jinro: The Wolf Brigade, and of course the stellar Ghost in the Shell TV shows, both big personal favorites of mine. But this dip into traditional fantasy is, I would say, unusual for our director. As well as kind of anime in general. So I was excited to see why Warner Brothers picked him up and what he would bring to the table. And I think, really, we talked about this a little bit, Tom, already after the film, but I'm happy to say Kenji just understood the assignment so well. Mm-hmm. As it turns out, what this does give us is an anime that tries to recreate a lot of how Peter Jackson's trilogy felt, without the scale of what comes with those movies doing it in live action. I'll make one comment later, but Kenji does one episode for that Star Wars Visions show, where it's like anime stories for Star Wars.
Okay.
And very similarly, going back to his work on that, I feel like this guy's getting picked by these Western studios because he just kind of understands what his anime is supposed to feel like to copy or to kind of emulate what, original works that he's trying to now switch into animation.
And that's why I also think it's huge that Peter Jackson is attached to the film. His production company, Wingnut Films, is. Philippa Boyan's doing part of the story.
Okay.
Original writer. And to have those guys in there and to get his expertise and just the knowledge base of the look and feel of the world was fantastic because Kenji did a great job at capturing Peter Jackson, specifically Peter Jackson's Middle Earth. Mm-hmm. It's huge.
Yeah. Absolutely,
that was done.
Absolutely, and I think that's where I come from with just my praise for this is that turns out the Lord of the Rings anime is not really an anime at all. I mean, it is anime, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels like WB had an animated version of Lord of the Rings, or that like one of these appendices is now being adapted after the fact.
Yeah.
War of the Rohirrim, though, I would describe this as kind of like a Machiavellian fantasy tale of blood feuds and family ties set, like you said, Tom, over 200 years before the original events of the original trilogy. We've talked a lot about how the high fantasy elements of Lord of the Rings are in play because of like magic and orcs and fantasy races.
Yeah.
This story has such a heavy focus on the realm of man. I would say it's wonderfully grounded because of that, and being set solely in Rohan with its power struggles. One thing I actually want to comment on with Rohan, I get a lot of vibes from it, especially with all the different houses, the flags of houses that they have with that.
Yeah.
It feels like I don't know, not Shakespearean, but like a Scottish type of feudal story where you have a lot of feudal kings all thinking they're right, all stubborn, all vying for power. And in that, I feel like that's why Rohan is an interesting, subsection of this world to laser in on. You know what I mean?
I freaking love it. And I've always loved Rohan. I always loved
you always have
Rohan in the movies.
Yep.
The fact that when I found out they were doing this, wow, okay, expand into this world, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I would say there's more stories to be told here just because I don't know what's in these appendices. But I feel like Rohan really, if we're going to have a grounded, I don't know, maybe even a little bit semi-closer to Game of Thrones, dark fantasy, there was something here that I was like, this is worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, technically there are I would say two other main stories in Rohan that they could do.
Sure.
Maybe that's the formation of the country.
Yep.
Okay. And then I would say afterwards with King Aomer, actually.
Oh, okay. Interesting. As far as who we're following here, we follow the untold story of Hera, daughter of the King of Rohan, the hero to many around her, even though she may not be remembered in the great tales of the land. The king, Helm Hammer Hand, 10 out of 10 name, by the way, Helm Hammer Hand.
Yeah.
I mean, people people give a lot of credit to J.K. Rowling for the linguistics she does for all like the wizardry stuff. Tolkien has her beat. Tolkien has everyone beat.
Well, she does is cute. It's for the kids.
You're right. Helm Hammerhand, that's a king's name. He's kind of earned the hatred of Wolf, Hera's childhood friend, who now vows to painfully unravel everything he has built for Rohan. Between heartbreak and tragedy, Hera must find the courage to stand up for her people in the legacy of the Shield Maidens, brave women that have rose to fight when no one else would. I think that on that note is where my first praise is. I thought this did a solid job at kind of growing or just expanding on the themes that we see in Return of the King specifically around Éowyn and her role for Rohan, kind of rising even though she's a female on the battlefield. This felt not tacked on at all and grew that a lot. Miranda Otto also does the narration here as well.
She's billed as Éowyn. So it's actually supposed to be the character of Éowyn doing the narration.
Talking about like this legacy.
Right.
Very interesting. I like that.
And I think
like
she
that
does
a lot.
It's great. Yeah. And I think she does a great job at taking let's just say the Kate Blanchett Galadriel role of the narration and setting up story.
Sure.
I think her voice, I didn't realize how good her voice is for a voiceover narration.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I thought she was great.
Absolutely. But I thought it was just framing this story around, again, something that we're familiar with in Return of the King. As a concept with Rohan, and a kind of a similar, like, one singular female is rising up, among the ranks. I thought this was great. On that note as well, with voice acting, Brian Cox is possibly the biggest star here. He does the voice for Helm. This was just a character, whether it was Brian Cox's voice acting or just my first exposure to Helm,
Right.
I enjoyed this character a lot. I just loved this, again, in almost like Scottish feudal lords way, like stubborn being his flaw and his biggest strength, his headstrongness to it. So,
Brian Cox was the voice for the character, I have to say. It was great.
Yeah.
I do need to step in because I kind of what your positives were there were my main negatives.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So,
main negatives.
And you should. And it's important to note. I feel like I'm in the same chair when we did the conclave. I kind of feel like I have
okay.
My footer is in two different pools. What is it? My hand is in two different cookie jars. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know where you're getting at, though.
So here's the thing. So the character of Hera doesn't really exist.
Oh, sure.
Okay,
sure.
so basically...
It's not even, like, reference among his sons that are referenced in this?
Okay, so basically, it's not really... this is not fleshed out at all in the books, and the upsetting thing is... You're adding lore, and this is the big thing with the fans. True Lord of the Rings fans are coming down harsh on this.
Yes.
I think I found one fan, and a hardcore fan, who kind of liked it.
Okay.
Who's kind of positive on it. And I have to say, overall, I'm actually positive on this movie. Where I do think we have an issue, again, is with the Hera character. They're just adding stuff that isn't necessary.
Okay.
So where I'm on that is there's a lot more there that could have been fleshed out with Helm, which is the character I want to see most and everybody else.
Sure, yeah.
His two...
Even watching the movie, I would say the same.
His two sons could have absolutely been fleshed out more.
Okay.
So we get less of... Because Hera takes such a center stage, we get less Helm, we get less of the two sons, and we get less of Helm's nephew, who is like second most important character.
Oh, really? Okay, interesting. And we don't even get the nephew in the movie.
We do a little bit. Yes, we do a little bit. My problem here, again, I'm surprised I don't have as big of a problem as I do. Because here's the thing. Even a little bit with me, I feel like their hands were tied and they had to do a large female character lead role here.
Okay.
Reason being is you have the 3 Lord of the Rings movies, completely male-centric. We barely have any females in it.
To the point of memedom, like the jokes about this is how many minutes 2 females interact in the original trilogy. And it's like 2 seconds.
Right.
You know?
So, the original Lord of the Rings. Then you have the 3 Hobbits, extremely male-centric. You just have...
and even the dwarves, yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
You have Evangeline Lilly basically come in and try to pull her weight a little bit.
Her inclusion was a joke.
And now you have The Hunt for Gollum, which is being produced.
Okay.
And
live action.
This is live action with Andy Serkis and Peter Jackson. And that's going to be, again, male-centric probably, because The Hunt for Gollum, which is they're calling it now. The title's probably going to change. But that's going to be a live-action film that should center around Aragorn and Gandalf mostly.
Oh, okay, that's buddy cop.
That takes place when Gandalf leaves the Shire after Bilbo's birthday, and he looks for Gollum for like 4 years or something like that, and him and Aragorn try to find Gollum.
Okay.
So I think it's these same production companies are just like, hey, we got to come up with something here. We got to do a female-led character.
Yeah,
here,
even just the demographics of it.
I can almost see that their hands were tied and they had to do something, so they went to expand this character.
Sure.
So with that being said, if they had to do it and they went this route, I'm glad that we're touching on Helm at least. And where they went with it was okay. I do think a little soap opera-y.
Okay.
Soap opera-y at times. And I think maybe the female romance or that squabbling aspect of it took away from the growing story that you're actually more excited about.
And the kind of the political strife between what's happening with Rohan.
Right, like something
who's vying for power.
Exactly. Something in the background is happening here.
Yeah.
So for instance, like people are really pissed about this Hera being blown up and the story being about her. I'm just going to read the part of all of the book that has to do with Hera.
Oh, okay.
The daughter.
Interesting.
Okay.
Right.
So all of the Lord of the Rings books we have, all of the information, thousands and thousands of pages, maybe even thousands of characters, of names. Let me just read this excerpt from Appendices A.
Appendices A.
To one of these councils, Freka rode with many men, and he asked the hand of Helm's daughter for his son Wolf. That's it.
Not even named Hera?
Her name is not even mentioned in the text. The only time Helm's daughter is mentioned is in one sentence.
Wow. Did not know that. Okay.
That's why the true fans have some serious issues. But like,
are they taking their knives? They better be taking their knives out on Rings of Power then.
Oh, listen.
Okay.
Listen.
Because I
Rings
feel
of
like...
Rings of Power, this is so much better than Rings of Power. But you have to understand how much that is hated, that people still are kind of really mad about this movie as well.
Sure. Yeah.
But is it better than Rings of Power? Like, I watched the final episode of Rings of Power this past weekend.
Yep. Was season 2?
Tripe, hot, flaming garbage. They try to make every single scene and character, they try to make you feel something so much.
Oh, yeah.
And it is the flattest, most contrived piece of crap you've ever seen.
I mean, going off of Brandon's note, I feel like that's what Halo was as well.
Characters look ridiculous.
Yeah.
It is, you know what it is? The last episode is everybody gets stabbed, and then they have 3 pages of dialogue still.
Wow.
Anyway,
Unreal.
so that was a long way to say I have issues. What they did with it wasn't terrible.
Sure.
I just wasn't loving that they did this because I want more from Helm, the 2 sons, and the nephew specifically.
And maybe something we can draw a line here just because the internet being the internet.
Yeah.
Your issue isn't necessarily that it is a female-centric story. The issue is more so that there are stories to tell within the book, phenomenal, unadjusted.
Correct.
And they chose to now just create something new.
Right. It feels like studio. It doesn't feel like people who care about the text.
Sure. And I think your viewpoint there is probably, right on the money, because Warner Brothers is probably seeing this as a product slate, a content slate, and what demographics do they have to hit on to make sure people, these are all still engaged. I feel like there's something there that makes perfect sense, not only with what you said, like they have to keep the license going.
Right.
I think on that note, as far as Hera goes, I definitely understood that fan disappointment. There's the disappointment that she is the focus for the story, not Helm. I think from my position, I was here to say, like, I think she earns the spotlight in these moments of action, and it might not be for what you think. I think walking into this, I expected using anime as a medium, we were just naturally going to get wild and just like really crazy action scenes, people flipping around and, doing all this anime stuff. But honestly, that wasn't the case at all. Combined the style of action scenes that we get with Legolas in these live action films, especially The Hobbit. And I really expected that, Kenji would look at this and say, okay, let's make some crazy, they want an anime Lord of the Rings, let's make some anime.
Right.
That is not at all the case here. And I think that is oddly, even though I'm the anime side of this, this equation, I thought that was a big highlight because nothing would rob the feeling of Lord of the Rings, no less Jackson's Lord of the Rings, further than, I don't know, everyone having near superpower level abilities.
Right.
The fact that it's Rohan, the fact that it's magicless is why this is so good, and grounded action is how it's communicated to us.
Grounded, exactly the word to use. The film is extraordinarily grounded.
Yeah.
And so if people are wary about this medium, meaning anime, but they're into Lord of the Rings, it's still, you're going to be okay watching this.
Absolutely.
You really are.
I'd call this a Warner Brothers animation first before anime, you know, because of how much it is, again...
Americanized.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not done to an extent like that you're going to say, oh, wow, this is visually crazy. But again, what that would do to rob the feeling of Lord of the Rings, it would just feel like an anime in a fantasy setting. We do get some, and Tom, you called it actually, walking right out of the theater. We get a slight kaiju action with the first scene involving a mama kill.
You just said, oh, it's grounded, very grounded.
Yeah. By the way, Godzilla's in the movie. No. There's kind of the first scene with a mama kill. We get a kind of an interesting thing. But I would say the action is still in those moments is not anime, you know, just at so much of a power level or so much of a fantasy that it takes away from the identity. I found it just refreshing that Hera was not just another superpowered character, not just another Legolas, and instead just focusing on clever tricks or cunning for her to win against her opposition. And I feel like that is what I would say to maybe some of, you know, the internet comments of saying, oh, another girl, another female-led thing. I get where you're coming from, that if it's not part of the original story and there's content there to use, don't make extra.
Right.
You're not better than Tolkien. But at the same time, I have no problem with this being a female-led story because, again, she was not... having the physicality of the soldiers around her. Every action sequence is around her being clever or cunning or getting one over.
And like you said, it was earned. You felt like her character was actually earning her spot for the limelight.
Yeah. I wanted to kind of move on to the animation stuff. Did you have anything to kind of comment on characters or action?
No. I mean, the biggest thing I got through my negatives, and that's really what that was that. And then everything else is kind of positive.
Yeah.
I do want to, I'll jump right into the story real quick, though, and then we can go into animation. I do want to say, so obviously the main part of the story with Hera is they're making up their own lore, making up their own stuff. But when they're not straying from it, it's pretty spot on the book. There are direct quotes used from the appendices on screen throughout the movie.
I mean, even the intro, I felt like, you know, looking over to you and saying, this is exactly what you described in the parking lot.
And there's exact quotes and a lot of the exact quotes from Helm and everything like that. So that was cool to see. And where the story goes overall, it's a lot of what happens, a lot what goes down. And so that was actually quite nice.
Yeah,
I'll say that as far as the text goes.
Absolutely. Animation-wise, this uses a lot of 3D environments with the characters themselves being done in that traditional anime style, whether it be the kind of the aesthetic of their look or just, you know, being animated. I'll be honest, I don't think the characters are like the best looking I've seen, especially just kind of in comparison, a very strong week for visual aesthetics.
Yeah.
But I do think it is absolutely key to why I commented on our director, once again, understanding the assignment. As you're watching this film, folks, you'll notice the constant, wide sweeping shots of the landscape with our characters just being dwarfed by just the massive scenery that they travel across. As far as cinematography goes, these shots are meant to copy the many iconic travel scenes of the Jackson trilogy, and I think that makes a very interesting feature to copy. I just feel like there is some serious foresight, some creative vision to Kenji looking at this and saying, what is the DNA of the Jackson trilogy? We commented on it when we covered the movies. It's these traveling scenes. It's these big, you know, New Zealand landscape shots.
The epicness of feeling like you're in Middle-earth.
Yeah.
That's why I can't tell you, I mean, the best part about this movie and why I think mostly I walk away with a smile on my face is it feels finally, again, like you're in Middle-earth.
Yes.
And like I said, it feels like specifically Jackson's Middle-earth, but to us, to the fans, that is Middle-earth.
That is, exactly.
And it's captured incredibly with the environment and even aesthetically, the way that people look.
Yep.
And everything from the buildings, the set pieces, everything was taken so carefully from Jackson's world. I mean, you look at Edoras in The Two Towers and then Edoras in this movie, everything is basically a one-to-one scale.
Sure.
Down to the way the throne looks is the same. Stuff like that, I love it. It's a very good feeling.
Yeah,
they really got it down right.
There's just something there that, again, it reminded me of just what this director can do when given the assignment to anime up a Western property and big properties. He had a single episode for that, the Star Wars Vision show. Some of those very, very bad. So don't let me say otherwise. But there was something there. It's just like the ones that he's tackling, and this included now, it's just like it feels like he did nothing else but sit down, watch the trilogy, and say, okay, what are these scenes actually making me feel?
Right.
And it comes from this vast feeling, these sweeping landscape shots.
Yep.
A great example of this early on in the film is Hera is riding up with her horse, and she takes out this massive piece of this hawk of meat, and she's like barely struggling to even get it out of the sack. She gets around, the camera's spinning around her, she's spinning the meat, and she throws it up, and the scene is just given such perspective by one of the eagles coming down, seeing how just giant the eagle is compared to like this crumb of a meat that it bites down in one bite. Just little things like that. I just feel like there's an understanding here going on.
They nailed it. They nailed something
of the feel of again, I don't know, maybe something as big as Majesty of those original trilogies. So I would say my only complaint when it comes to the animation is it's just a little visually dark sometimes. I found it kind of hard to decipher what was going on in some of the later action scenes. But once again, Kamiyama he gets at the feeling of those original movies, which I think is probably the biggest win, especially even my own sideline opinions of what like is going on with Rings of Power and like their props and set that just looks like a joke compared to what this series has done.
Yeah, absolutely. So. Real quick, and then just me not like being a big anime guy too. One thing to watch out for is it can almost appear goofy at times. I think a shot was shown at one point, and it kind of got laughs from the crowd.
Oh, okay.
Because sometimes anime and the style, or if they do a certain zoom out shot or something, it can look a little goofy for a split second, and then there's the goofiness of people talking sometimes, where a character will talk, and then they'll just hold on that character in silence for maybe 3 seconds when you should have cut immediately. There's that kind of weird aspect, but that's like a goofiness that comes with anime sometimes.
Sure.
But some normal viewers might not be used to that.
Yeah, I think that hits on what you were saying with some of the dramatic beats, the melodrama or the romance in this movie, that it's trying to have dramatic beats that an actor would thrive at, and show minor emotions in their face. Anime is not the medium for that. Yeah. So, I thought this was a really solid movie, though, despite unfortunately kind of the two separate fan bases online not being too happy with it. It doesn't seem to be anime anywhere near enough for the weeaboos online, and doesn't just seem to be Lord of the Rings enough for the Tolkien nerds online, and definitely got some of that perspective there. That's almost exactly where I would still recommend it, because it was something new in a vast storyline. I don't necessarily have the gripes of, can we add to Tolkien lore? Is that untouchable because they've been touching it already? I think that's where I come from. I would say this still is trying to be faithful to the best parts, and in that, I don't know, do I see it hooking someone that isn't into Lord of the Rings already? No. But there is still something there that this was definitely worth a watch, and I still think checking out for anime and Tolkien nerds alike. With that said, we're going to go ahead and give The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, a 68.
Ooh, a 68%. I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that from you.
Good.
And because I'll tell you what, we're almost on the exact same page.
Yeah.
The only other note I think I should say about it, and because we were both feeling this way, and a bit of a negative, it is too long.
And maybe just the how the romance creeps in.
Well, so here's the point. So first of all, I think, it's 2 hours and 14 minutes.
Yep.
I believe it was 2.5 hours.
Okay.
And they cut down to make it 2:15. Originally, when it was announced, they were saying it was going to be a 90-minute movie.
Oh. Okay.
And my thing is, there's too many slow moments in here, and you could have shaved minutes from each of these, and you could have easily got this 15 minutes shorter.
Yeah.
And it would have went very far. It is 15 minutes too long. And I think the vast majority of audiences would feel that.
Yep.
Also, because...
And you feel that in kind of latter half of the second act. We won't talk about spoiler-wise, but, there's a slowdown intentionally. That makes sense intentionally, story-wise, but
it's too much of a slowdown.
Yeah.
And it's a couple of too many of those. And then also, the only other thing is, the end of the film is leading up almost to a slam bam finish. And then we don't get what I was expecting or at least hoping for.
Sure.
And that's the biggest letdown. Had we had that, this would be bumped up for me a little bit.
Yep.
But even with that being said, we did get to see some more awesome Rohan. And most importantly, it felt like Middle-earth. And it was so great to be sitting in the movie theaters and seeing a new Lord of the Rings piece of content that made me feel like I was in Middle-earth for the first time in years. But with that, it gets 2 shoes, laces untied, and a little bit of polish, so for the people on the podcast.
There it is.
Which is basically your 68%, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm right basically there.
And I think, again, leagues better than Rings of Power. It's live action or animated.
It's not even a question.
Yeah.
And I'm to understand that horses are difficult to do anime with as well.
Yeah, just anything, like a lot of moving parts with it. That's why a lot of times, like, cars are always 3D animated now, because it's a real pain to draw a car in either stretch frames or or blurs.
Okay.
So,
but okay, Vin. Looking at these scores, anything else to add?
No, I
Roll
think
credits?
that's about it. I'm really happy with this discussion, and I'm glad that you had some Lord of the Rings time with it. I definitely tried to condense the prior reviews to give you the runway.
I didn't know where I was. I hope I wasn't too long in the tooth or long in the tongue.
Well, I like that you started out calling them the horse people, and then
I started out simple.
Right, but by the end of that description, we were getting into like lineages and names and blood. So I think that actually was well balanced. It was well rounded.
I knew it right. I knew I was going to get a little.
You got to
hook
the newbies, and then the depth's there for anyone that needs it.
Next week, Finn, we're going to have a nice little quick episode for everybody.
Oh, yeah.
On the holiday week of Christmas.
Yep, we're trying to record that Monday before the holiday hits, and it's probably just going to be a 2-slot: Mufasa and Sonic 3.
That's fine. We'll do the new releases. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And how we're structuring, folks, we're going to do Mufasa and Sonic, and then we're going to do the Nosferatu.
Yep.
And what is that one called?
Complete Unknown.
Yes, the Bob Dylan movie.
Yep.
After that, the week after that, we'll have catch-up episode where we get the remnants of what we've missed out on 2024. And the week after that, we've got the Tom Daly. So we have some good episodes coming up.
Absolutely.
And enjoy, adult animation this week, kid animation for the kids.
Wake the kids up. We're going to the movies.
Vin, thank you so much for watching these films. Thanks for stopping by here. Folks at home will run it down one more time. We have Gandahar with a 71%, Mars Express with an 81%, Mononoke the Movie, Phantom in the Rain with a 65%, and finally, The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim with a 68% and a 2 shoes, no laces. Folks, thank you so much, as always, for stopping by here, and we'll see you next week on the Daily Ratings Podcast. Hey, if you enjoyed the podcast, if you would, give us a good rating or get the word out and tell a friend about us. And just a reminder that the Daily Ratings is completely producer supported. We want to stay away from advertising, and we don't want to have any paywalls or tier structures or subscriptions. It's all just value for value. So, are you finding value in what we're doing here at the Daily Ratings? Then become a producer and donate whatever amount of value that is. Just go to the donations tab on thedailyratings.com. And while you're there, be sure to check out the massive amount of films that Vince has rated. All right, thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you next time on the Daily Ratings Podcast.